Competitor Running Hangouts here on Google+. Today my guest is Ben Rosario, who's the founder and coach of Northern Arizona Elite. Ben, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is my first time hanging out via Google.
Yeah, and this is our pilot episode, so we're excited to have you as our first guest. I want to keep the topic pretty tight today. I want to talk about sponsorship in professional running, which I know is a topic that is super important to you. Your team, Northern Arizona Elite, you guys have been up and running now, no pun intended, for a little over 6 months. And I know sponsorship, not just on the individual level, but for the group, is a big deal for you guys. And big announcement this past week was that Training Peaks signed on as the first sponsor of Northern Arizona Elite. So let's just start by talking about that deal and how long you were in discussions with Training Peaks and what some of the challenges were along the way to get that first sponsor on board.
Yeah, so that came about kind of in an interesting, very organic way in that Brianna Bamer, who works for Training Peaks on the run side, because they're very popular with cyclists and triathletes, and she contacted me just doing some research about running coaches and what they would be looking for from an online software coaching tool, which is what Training Peaks is. And so we had a great conversation, and then at the end of it, I couldn't help but kind of say, hey, I mean, if you guys are interested in really working with a group in a big way, we'd be interested. So that's how it started, and then it just we had a few conversations, and we were actively looking for a big title sponsor as well during that time, and still are, and are getting a lot closer to that. But Training Peaks was from the beginning going to be more of a secondary sponsor, but a big one, and the highest level behind, underneath title. And so yeah, eventually we just got to the point where we gave them a proposal and started the talks. I mean, I'd say the whole thing took 3 or 4 months, but it got going really fast at the end. So like the last 2 weeks, a lot of talks and just hammering everything out.
Now, what does a sponsorship like this do for your team? I'm not sure the exact number of folks in your group now, but I think it's hovering around 10. What does this type of deal do for your team, and how will you integrate Training Peaks into what you guys do on a daily basis?
So there's 8 athletes right now, and 5 men and 3 women. And what it does in the short term, for sure, is it gives them more massages, more chiropractic care, which is really important. So it quadruples what we had before in terms of free massage, so that's good, and chiro. So for them, that's huge. And then for me as a coach, the Training Peaks system it's way better than what I was doing before. I mean, I'm kind of an old school guy, which I told them, from the beginning. I'm more like Ron Warhurst than I am like Alberto Salazar,
Right.
if you want to look at the opposite ends of the spectrum. So for me, to be able to, on the Training Peaks app, no matter where I am, and I'm in St. Louis this weekend, I can see almost in real time what the athletes did. And not only what they did, because it's one thing to say you ran 10 miles, but it's another to be able to look at every single split, look at their heart rate during the entire run, look at the elevation lost and gained. It's really, I mean, I'm just now learning it, but I'm blown away.
Now, you said it yourself. You're an old school type of coach. You weren't adopting this type of technology before you entered into this partnership with Training Peaks, and a lot of athletes are that way too. They keep a paper training log. They don't like to share their workouts all that much, and I'm sure you can keep it private with your group. But was it difficult to get everyone on your crew on board with Training Peaks, or does stuff like this end up becoming a requirement if you want to be part of the group and they are a sponsor?
Well, it wasn't difficult because they knew we had been in talks with Training Peaks, so they knew that was a possibility. But more so, we already were putting our our training online, and this just allows us to put even more data online. Before you could read that Matt ran 10 miles, and 4 miles in the afternoon or whatever it might be. But now, again, the public will be able to see some of these things. So we're going to start linking these charts and all these things online. But yeah, I mean, they were happy. I mean, they want to do, as long as it's a sponsor that we feel, I mean, we're not going to do anything that we're not going to be fake. We're really using this stuff. And they're excited. I mean, I think that's why it's interesting, because running, we are a little old school in general, I think. And so, the way I've seen this is, hey, the best cycling teams in the world are using this stuff. The best triathletes in the world are using this stuff. We can't be so naive as to think that we're smarter than these folks. We need to get on board. And so they've adopted it pretty well. I mean, there's a bit of a learning curve, but they're getting the hang of it. Yeah.
Now, you have a pretty unique model in your group in that, amongst your 8 athletes, a lot of them have individual sponsorships, be it with a shoe company or what have you. How does a group-wide sponsorship like Training Peaks affect that from, like, say, a branding perspective? Will there be a Training Peaks logo on the athlete's uniform? How will they be showcasing the fact, other than posting their workouts, that Training Peaks is helping them achieve their dreams?
Well, we have a whole list of things, in the contract that we're supposed to be doing. And a lot of it is social media. A lot of it is on my end of, making sure that on the website we get the athletes' workouts up so they can look at them. We are incorporating the Training Peaks logo into the website, so it's Northern Arizona Elite powered by Training Peaks. That's incorporated into our social media as well. But again, they're not the title, so it's not. There's still that room for us to put.
It's not the Training Peaks Northern Arizona Elite team.
What's that?
I said it's not the Training Peaks Northern Arizona Elite team, so they're not.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. So the idea ultimately down the road is to have one big title and then 2 or 3 secondary sponsors that we believe in and that we can get behind and really create a value for them. So.
Now, in your group, you've got a few younger members coming out of school. It's hard for them to get, in a lot of cases, a shoe deal or something that's going to allow them to focus on their training full time. And you had mentioned how this Training Peaks sponsorship is going to allow them to, get more massage and take care of that sort of stuff. Amongst your group, like, what types of discussions have you had about chasing those individual sponsorships in conjunction with chasing a sponsorship for the group as a whole, so that you can allow your athletes to be in a position that, running is their focus, that, hopefully they don't have to work a part-time job. How does that all fit together?
Yeah, so we've had lots of conversations because it's a tricky time right now for us because as a group collectively we feel and believe that a title sponsorship for our group ultimately would be better than any individual sponsorship they can get. If you look closely at the deals that some of the other groups have, the good ones, those deals are typically better than any one athlete could get individually in the group. So that's our hope, is that we can get a title sponsor for the group that then those folks wouldn't have to go after a big individual sponsor. Now that doesn't mean they couldn't get sponsors that were interested in them and not the group, but that didn't conflict with anything we had. But at the same time, I'm not here to stop anybody from getting paid. So if an individual sponsor was interested in one of our athletes and offered them a very good deal before we were able to get a title sponsor for the whole group and there was a conflicting situation, we'll have to cross that bridge, We're still holding out hope that we can get, and I think it's very possible, to get a title before the end of the year. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And you asked earlier about, just real quick, about who has individual deals. Mm-hmm. There are 3 athletes on the team that have individual deals, but they're all up at the end of 2014. So it puts us in a nice position.
Right. Now, as founder and coach of the team, the last 6 months you've been hustling really hard to get these types of sponsorships for the group. What have been the biggest challenges that you've faced from potential sponsors, like, that may be resistant or don't want to put up as much as you might want to support 8 people? What has been some of the pushback, if any, on that side of things?
Well, I would say, obviously we're young and new, but that doesn't seem to have been a super big problem, to be honest, because everybody likes what we're doing.
Right.
So nobody has said no, honestly. Like, we're still almost in talks with everybody that we've reached out to. It's just a slow process. But I think the challenge is that they look at the deals that we're giving them, the proposals, and some of the bonuses and things they're very high dollar numbers, But you've got to understand that if an athlete makes the Olympics, that's worth every penny.
Right.
That's that's a lifetime worth of advertising for whoever this sponsor might be, because you're going to be on the covers of magazines and you're going to be interviewed by every person and every publication. Those pictures are going to last a lifetime from the trials and from the Olympics. And I mean, you have to make those bonuses big. And the problem is the people that sign the checks are going to add up all the bonuses. They're not going to say, well, obviously you're not going to hit all these.
Right.
They're just going to add them up. And
they look at the worst case scenario.
They look at the total worst case scenario, which for them means the best case scenario for us.
Right.
And that's how much money they look at. So they look at that total number. So we're trying to get creative and do some salary cap type things and some bonus cap type things that are making the proposals a little more easier, or a little easier to swallow for the check writers, if you will. But the people that are in marketing and in sports marketing at these companies really like the pitch. Right. They really like it. But it's just, you have to convince the people that are going to finally sign the check. And that's probably the biggest challenge. The other challenge is that the market has been devalued. Too many athletes over the last 10 years have taken deals that are way too soft, way undervaluing themselves and the industry and their peers. And I don't necessarily blame them, but at the same time, it's caused a problem.
It hurts everyone else.
It hurts everyone else. Yeah, you can't have people taking free, I don't want to say a product, taking a free product and acting like it's a sponsorship. Right. And tweeting out about it and blogging about it and wearing your shirts. If they're not giving you cash, real cash, then it's not a sponsorship. Right. It's support. They're supporting you, and that's nice. And you should thank them accordingly and return the value accordingly. And I believe in over delivering, but then there's a point where it just gets ridiculous.
Right. Last question. What you're trying to do with this, whole title sponsorship thing and Training Peaks, it reminds me a lot of the Japanese system. They have, Suzuki sponsors a team, Sony sponsors a team, a lot of the big electronic companies, and, we have those here in the U.S., and none of them are behind running teams. What would it do for the sport if we could have these teams, whether they're corporate sponsored or not, and get people behind them? Almost make this, sort of like the major leagues of road racing or track and field or whatever it is. How big is that, one, for the growth of the sport, and two, for actually securing these sponsorships? If there's half a dozen to a dozen teams that have a big name company behind them, if Apple gets behind your team or whatever, then all of a sudden, maybe Samsung wants to come in the U.S. because Apple has a presence amongst millions of runners. Like, how important is that whole dynamic?
Well, if you want to make the call to Apple, go ahead. No, I think it would be great. To me, that's the best model moving forward. I like to take the approach that, look, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The American sports fan of any sport seems to gravitate toward teams. Teams are the machine that push the athletes, and then the athletes within those teams become popular as well. And I'm a sports guy. Like, that's kind of my background. I'm a sports nut. So to me, there's so much more value in a group. In running, a person's only going to race 8 or 10 times a year, maybe. That's if they're healthy. If they're not healthy, they might not race at all for a whole year. So you're getting such a bigger value for a title sponsor or a sponsor of any kind if you're sponsoring a group. I mean, our group, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but out of the 7 months of the year so far, we've raced almost every single weekend in some capacity somewhere across the United States or across the globe. If you're only sponsoring one person, you don't get near that kind of exposure.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a fan's perspective, it's the same way. Like, if you're a fan of the group, then you get to be a fan almost every weekend instead of 5 weekends a year. And so to me, the group model makes so much sense for fans because I think it's more fun. And I think that's the thing, is it has worked. I appreciate you having me on and acting like I'm doing all these new things. But the truth of the matter is the Hansons Group has been doing this for 15 years. And they're hugely successful. And it's not like every person in the group is a huge superstar. I mean, for Pete's sake, I ran for the group. I wasn't that good. But, they have fans because they're constantly out there. You always see the yellow and red, and it gives people someone to cheer for and a group to cheer for. And now the Mammoth Track Club has a very nice deal with ASICS, and I think it's a good model. And I think, obviously the Oregon Project, I was at a high school camp this morning talking, or a high school cross-country practice in St. Louis, and kid had his Oregon Project jersey on. To me, that's the model. And so I think what it can do for the sport is just bring it. It's not that we're going to create way more fans. I saw an article about this recently. But we already have a nice fan base. Yeah, I think we'll create more fans with teams, but I think we're going to give the fans that we already have more to cheer about and more to talk about and more to be excited for.
I agree with that. I mean, it seems to be very scattered because it's such an individual sport, and we don't have the depth of teams that a lot of other sports do. And I remember, I look back to the 2008 marathon trials, November of 2007 in New York City, and I remember that about the Hansons. They had, Brian Sell, Little Dolls, and there was so much red and yellow around Central Park, going from one end of the course to the other, and they were following, yes, Brian Sell, but all the Hansons members that were there. And you didn't see that amongst any of the other groups. So it's like, imagine, in LA in 2016 or 2020, where we've got 12 teams that are each producing Olympic trials level qualifiers, fighting for 3 spots on the Olympic team, yes, as individuals, but, you've got this, this huge team competition out there. Just what that does for the overall excitement of the sport. It makes it fun to watch again.
It's just more storylines. And think about it from an athlete's point of view. Like, again, it's a very high-end sport. Like, either you're very good or nobody knows who you are, right? But in a group, you can get a name for yourself because people follow the group. I mean, I don't have to go through our whole team, but there's people on our team who have fans across the country because of the social media we put out. And, we're still growing. But that if they were on their own doing it in their college town or, wherever by themselves, no one would know who they are,
Exactly.
And that's a big difference. If you want to be a star and you want people to know who you are, you have to have somebody behind you pushing you besides just you. I read an article the other day, or a opinion piece from somebody that was kind of ripping elite athletes and saying, oh, well, Ryan and Meb give so much back to the community. And I was thinking, don't you think that there's a lot of athletes that would love to do that? But you have to get good first.
Right.
People have to know who you are before you can give back. And Meb, he does all these talks because people call him every day asking him to do talks. And so they have to know who you are first. It's a chicken and the egg thing. And I think the groups will help build people's individual brands as well as the team brand.